Today we have kept a topic for discussion on the restarting surgery in and after the COVID. Let me just take 1 minute only to say why we have chosen this topic. Because if you see almost 1.5 years have passed, we are in the midst of the COVID. We are only conducting emergency surgical procedures with the COVID guidelines. The routine surgery is almost very negligible or it has stopped for some time. Now that we have to restart and clear our backlog, we have to learn the principle, the guidelines of COVID norms in conducting the surgery to protect us and to protect our patients. With this, let me introduce our guest speaker of this evening, Dr. Parvin Bhatia, who is a globally acclaimed laparoscopic and bariatric surgeon working in Sir Gangaram Hospital and his own Bhatia Global Hospital at New Delhi. He is a teacher of teachers in the field of bariatric and laparoscopic surgery. He is not a new face to this state of Odisha. He has visited this place several times on occasions of CME's workshops and particularly to our department on many occasions. So we treat him as an adopted son of Odisha. And Dr. Nihar Ranjan Pradhan, one
Sir,
of our SCB alumni. He is the chief vascular surgeon and is presently working as the senior consultant in the field of vascular surgery in Apollo Hospital, Hyderabad. And I can say that he is not only an alumni of the SCB, he is a gold in the country in the field of vascular surgery. With this, I request our respected Dean and Principal to chair this session and give his welcome address. Dean sir.
Thank you, Professor Misra. In fact, this is an occasion to welcome you all because the occasion is that we are going to celebrate the Platinum Jubilee of this premier institution, one of the leading institutions of the country. I welcome Dr. Parvin Bhatia, Dr. Mihir Ranjan Pradhan, all my faculty colleagues, and I request the proceeding to start. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I request Dr. Parvin Bhatia to present his talk. We have distributed that each speaker will speak for 20 minutes and after the completion of both the speakers, we will have a 20 minutes question and answer session. Welcome, Dr. Bhatia.
Thank you, Dean and Principal, and thank you, Dr. Mishra, for making me part of the Platinum Jubilee celebrations of SCB Medical College. I must thank the Department of Surgery, the General Surgery, that they have always been welcoming me anytime and every time. But today there is a difference. So many webinars, so many personal meetings. We have been talking about laparoscopic hernia repair, laparoscopic abdominal wall reconstruction, laparoscopic cholecystectomy, and so on and so forth. But today, we are not going to touch about the technical surgical aspects. Today, we are going to have a discussion, and I will be the first learner in that discussion on how to restart the surgery in and after the COVID era. In next 20 minutes, I thought that I have not been sharing, I will not be sharing the slides, but I will be putting my thoughts. I have sent the guidelines of American College of Surgeons, the Royal College of Surgeons of England, SAGES, the Society of American Gastrointestinal Endosurgeons, and European Association of Endosurgeons to Dr. Bani Mishra. And I would request him that he can share all those guidelines with you so that ultimately all of us are working in one direction, that is direction of safety. Now, this safety has two arms. First will be safety of the surgeons, and second will be the safety of the patients also. The safety of the surgeons would mean that will include the hospital staff also. That I am very pleased to know that today we are not only the surgeons, but we have a gathering of anesthetists, the gynecologist, and different surgical specialties. So thoughts are, first and foremost, whenever we take a flight, then the announcement from the air hostess is, first take care of your oxygen and then take care of the oxygen of the person who is sitting next to you. If you are fit, if we are fit as surgeons, and then only we will be able to give the maximum benefit to the patients. For our safety, please, with folded hands, may I request all our younger surgeons, younger anesthetists, younger colleagues, that please follow the guidelines and please follow the basic rules of SMS. Socializing, social distance, 1, mask, 2, and I would urge you to use 2 masks. One is N95, and over that there should be a surgical mask, so that ultimately fitting of the mask is done absolutely clearly, that we are not the super spreaders of the infection. And third is SMS. S is for sanitization and hand washing. Most of the surgeons are in a habit of washing the hands again and again, but I would request especially my anesthetist friends also to follow this sanitization. Wash your hands as many times as possible, so that ultimately none of us become the super spreader of the virus. Let me not frighten you, but we have seen in this COVID time so many deaths of the surgeons, of the anesthetists, of the hospital staff, of the operation theater staff, that the cascade of events start, and we ultimately do not come to know where did the first spark start. So let us assume that any and every patient is positive, any and every person is positive until proved otherwise. So we should take care of our health first and then the other health. And if you are having, for example, if as surgeon we are having the comorbidities of obesity, hypertension, diabetes, CAD, and so on and so forth, this is the time that one should definitely work on it. Keep yourself fit, and then we will be able to make others fit also. One. Second thing is that in this elective surgery, when we take over the elective surgery, please do not do any compromises. I know there will be some time when you will start saying that now there are no COVID cases, so why should I go in for RT-PCR? No, our thinking is, before the patient goes in for the operation theater, he or she should definitely have within 48 hours, and this is not our thought only, this has been proven beyond doubt by American College of Surgeons, the Royal College of Surgeons, SAGES, IAS, and IAGS, that so many guidelines have been there that within 48 hours one should definitely go in for RT-PCR test. And please do not make the antigen test as the confirmatory test. Antigen, all of us know that yes, there are situations in which one can know that this is the antigen positive or antigen negative, but again and again our emphasis is, if we are going in for elective surgery, please get the RT-PCR done, and if it is negative, then only post the patient for surgery. If, for example, there is a situation which is a semi-emergency, or emergency, then one can ask for both the test, RT-PCR as well as antigen test, and then go in. Or the other test, the CP-NAT or the TrueNAT test, which is available, which the answer comes in within 3 hours. In Gangaram Hospital also, in Bhatia Global Hospital also, we follow this policy that if there is an emergency, then go for this BioFire or TrueNAT test. And in this, obviously, the patient has to bear some more cost as compared to, for example, I will just elaborate. RT-PCR would cost 800 rupees, whereas BioFire or TrueNAT would cost 4,500. But ultimately, our aim is that there is safety in more safety. So we have to take those precautions. And within 3 hours, the results come, and then one can plan the way we want it. Now, next thing is that when we are taking the patient into the operation theater, not much overcrowding should be there, in the sense that not many observers should be there in the theater. As anesthetist, we should make sure that only 1 or 2 technicians are there who are going to help you during the intubation. During the intubation, please wear both the mask. Please take face screen also. Please make sure that you are not having the virus or you are not taking the virus from the patient. Treat any and every patient as positive until and unless proved otherwise. And then when we are intubating the patient, initially in COVID wave 1 and COVID 2 wave 2, we practiced that we used to have a screen, and thinking that at the time of intubation, we'll put in the screen and then intubation will be done. But ultimately it proved futile. It did not give us the best benefit. So we are not using the screen of the glass screen in front of the patient or on the head of the patient, but definitely we used to put ourselves on with 2 masks and face screen, and that definitely helps. When we start doing the surgery, please make sure that the insufflation, for example, I am talking of laparoscopic cholecystectomy. When we are insufflating the patient, then we use the Veris needle from the Palmer's point, but we leave the Veris needle onto the Palmer's point and connect it through the filter, through the smoke filter, either to the smoke evacuator if the hospital has it. If the smoke evacuator is not there in the hospital, then definitely a long tubing is attached into the suction bottle in which there is hypochlorite solution, so that whenever we are using harmonic, monopolar or bipolar cautery, then we are not causing the aerosols to spread. And if the aerosols spread to us or to our assistants or to our technicians, that can also be the cause of the spreading of the virus. So we should make sure, especially when we are using the open cautery also, please make sure with the open cautery pencil tip, we have the suction attached, so that ultimately it is drifted away. The smoke is drifted away. It is not coming on to the surgeon. Whenever, for example, there is some fluid in the peritoneal cavity, or blood or pus or anything, definitely make sure that we are taking adequate precautions, that we do not mix it with the environment, and that can cause the infection. Please make sure that when we are going in for scrubbing also, please use those gowns, not the cloth gowns, but disposable gowns, and that too with the sheet or the material which is impervious to water. What I mean to say that the situation can be, if it is a low quality gown or PP kit which one is using, then the fluid can peep in or go into the gown, and that can also be responsible for taking the virus load. Our thinking is that please wear even the shoe covers, so that even if some fluid falls on the shoes or the chappals one is wearing, but one is not getting exposed to any kind of viral load. Third, as we have gone in and once we are operating, then the trocars, for example, laparoscopic trocars also, please make sure that either they are new so that the air leak is as less as possible. That means it is not going into the environment, and that ultimately becomes the harbinger. I am not frightening you, but I am just sharing my thoughts that can you imagine there have been situations in different hospitals of Delhi, not I am not naming any one of them, but there have been many situations. Patient was tested pre-operatively, he or she was RT-PCR negative, but after getting the surgery done, after 1 or 2 days, patient started having fever, patient started having features of COVID infection, and ultimately was proven to be COVID positive. And believe me, some patients have died also. So that is the reason that we emphasize that it is our moral responsibility that we do not give any infection to any person, whether when the patient is coming as RT-PCR negative, and we, the staff, is also careless, then we can give the infection to the patient, and that can lead on to cascade of events. So we have to be very, very careful. So my younger colleagues should learn out of this that please take a proper history. One. Second, most important aspect is that all our staff should have the vaccination. There should not be any doubt that 2 doses of vaccination have been given to all the staff. The staff, and I would request my dean and principal to not to allow anyone to come into the operation theater or onto the ward if they have not been vaccinated, because ultimately that is the safety, that is our responsibility as administrators also, that we safeguard their health as well as safeguard the health of the patients also. And all these patients should be asked at the time of surgery whether they had the COVID infection or not, whether they had the vaccination or not. For example, if the patient has had COVID infection in wave 1 or wave 2, and if the time period has not elapsed for the complications of COVID, for example, if COVID was there maybe 15 days back, and patient is still recovering after pneumonitis, I would never ever take that kind of patient for laparoscopic cholecystectomy, for example, or the elective surgery. So approximately 3 months should pass after getting the COVID infection because of the immunity status. Because of once the COVID is there, we know that after 10 to 12 days, the virus will be dead, but still the immunity, the antibody formation and the immunity which is going to last. So we should definitely ask the history that when was the COVID, and we should wait for at least 3 months. Similarly, for the vaccination also, one should make sure that if the COVID infection was there, then if the vaccination has to be done, then it should be a period of around 12 weeks so that we are absolutely safe. One. Second thing is that yes, the guidelines, the European guidelines have also clearly demonstrated that when the patients had the mild kind of COVID or moderate disease or the severe disease, if the mild disease is there and the patient has to have some elective procedure, but it is a semi-elective, I would put it this way, then 1 month waiting should be there. But if 3 months, nothing like it. If it was a moderate kind of infection, when the patient had to be given remdesivir or injections or ivermectin and so on and so forth, or patient had to be hospitalized, then definitely 2 months waiting has to be there. And if it was a severe kind of infection, in the sense mild, moderate, and severe disease, if the patient needed the ventilation, patient needed a prolonged stay, then 3 months waiting is an ideal time. So the timing of the surgery is very, very important. Safety is of utmost importance. And then once we finish our surgery, then also please make sure that patient is shifted to the area which is more or less COVID free. And if, for example, if the patient is shifted to the ICU, then it should be a separate ICU as compared to COVID ICU. And then the COVID patient should not catch the virus from some other patient. So these are the thoughts that one should, and plus, in laparoscopic surgery, the advantage is that we have a shorter hospital stay, minimal stay, and the patient is discharged. But in open surgery, we have to make sure that they are shifted to the area in which not much relatives are coming in, not much contamination is there, and that can lead to challenges later on. So again and again, in few words, I would put it this way, that please take care of your health. Please take care of healthcare workers' health first, then take care of the health of the patients. And preparedness is of utmost importance, in the sense that we faced a lot of challenges of oxygen crunch in this COVID time, COVID tsunami. So please make sure that if we are starting or restarting the elective surgery, there should not be any oxygen crunch. That means in an OT as well in an ICU, post-op ICU, oxygen availability has to be perfect, and then only we should restart the surgery. Dr. Mishra, I think these are the thoughts which I wanted to initiate, and because my time of 20 minutes is over, so I would love to rest here, and then I would definitely request you all to ask me n number of questions so that all of us are learning. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for the opportunity provided. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, sir. We will have the question answer session after Dr. Nihar Pradhan finishes his talk. There is a small announcement that suddenly there is a technical error which has occurred, and the system is not taking up more than 100 participants, and at the end of 40 minutes, it may stop. So by chance it stops, please rejoin in the same link again. Your kind attention, please, all of you. By chance it goes out, then please rejoin in the same link. I now request Dr. Nihar Ranjan Pradhan, our SCB alumni, to deliver his talk.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, very much.
Sir, I'll share my screen. Is it visible screen, sir?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, very much, Nihar. Just make it full screen, please. Nihar.
Yes. So first, I give my special thanks to the Professor Hota sir, our present dean and head of the department of urology and principal, and special thanks to Professor Misra sir, Banabihari Misra sir, our teacher, and also Kailash Mahapatra sir. And when I was making this slide, I was a bit emotional looking at all the photographs of our college, because I belong to the batch of 87 SC Medical College. And when I said that while present today in our WhatsApp group, all our classmates were extremely happy that I got this honor to present in this Platinum Jubilee celebration. And in the yesterday when I was discussing with Professor Misra Banabihari sir that what I am going to present, so nicely our Dr. Parveen Bhatia sir from Sir Gangaram Hospital, he presented in detail. So what I was thinking, we were facing lot of thrombotic complications almost every day. 2 to 3 patients of post-COVID thrombosis patients are coming. So how we'll manage those patients, and when we are planning for surgery, how we can avoid these complications of thrombosis. And like Dr. Bhatia sir told clearly that the gap should be maintained, everything. So in the subsequent presentation, I will highlight on those. So this is a study where it is showing that the impact of severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 on post-operative recovery. So you can see here the overall mortality was around 23.8% and overall pulmonary complications 51%. So predictor for pulmonary complications, the grades were 3 to 5, and pulmonary complications occurred in 80% of those who died. So 30-day mortality rate was very high in the patients who had undergone surgery in the post-COVID state. So the prevalence of COVID-2 was 10% perioperatively, and 30-day mortality rate was higher, and complications were significantly higher, and pulmonary complications were also higher. So thrombotic complications were also seen in the patients who had been operated. And yesterday, when I was passing to my OPD, so in the lift, one of our thoracic surgeon, he was explaining about one patient. So when we come out from the lift, then he presented me that those patients who operated, on whom he operated, so why there was, in spite of sufficient anticoagulation with the proper dose, patient was developing lot of thrombosis. So then I thought, so this might be a different part of our country, and also our surgeons facing this problem. So we'll discuss how to alleviate this. So this is one patient. You can see here, this is a study also saying that post-COVID vascular complications are high because of thrombosis. This is one patient, post-COVID-19 positive man with no medical history, developed acute claudication of the right limb without neurologic deficit 3 days after admission. So CT angiograph showed short occlusion of the right common iliac artery. So here, with simple thromboembolectomy, the leg could be saved. And this is another patient. You can see here, the right limb entirely it was thrombosed. So here, the similar situation last year, when I was doing thromboembolectomy, the patients were invariably losing either below knee or above knee, because we cannot do thromboembolectomy in all the branches. So in this situation, this patient, what we did catheter-directed thrombolysis, and after that, we could see the blood flow till foot was good. So we could save the limb doing 4-foot amputation. So, but all the patients were not so lucky. I will present in subsequent slides. So all we know that how this COVID-19, the presentation, no symptom, mild to moderate symptom, severe symptom, and critical symptom. So why I gave this slide? So the patients who are having severe to critical symptoms, they are of high risk of post-surgery mortality. So we have to be very careful for those patients. But those who are having no or mild symptom, they may escape with any complications. So I was explaining to our thoracic surgeon that why our patient on whom he has done thoracic surgery under thoracoscopy, he told that in spite of giving adequate anticoagulant, why there was massive thrombosis from jugular vein to renal artery, and also pulmonary artery, and finally here he lost the patient. So I told that it is not only thrombosis, it is not hypercoagulable state alone. This is inflammatory. You can see here the inflammatory response, that is endothelial dysfunction and superimposed infection. That is the most problem in this COVID patient. That is causing the thrombosis on the blood vessels. So this is the how these macrophages and lymphocytes causing microthrombi. And see here in this slide how it is causing the hypercoagulation and the D-dimer is increasing in this. So how the D-dimer helps? So elevation in D-dimer, fibrinogen and other inflammatory markers is common up to half of the patient, and unlike classic DIC, so thrombocytopenia is mild and microangiopathy is not present, but development of DIC might be seen at an advanced stage and is associated with a worse prognosis. So lymphopenia has been reported in 30 to 50% of patients. So here one nice study where 191 patients included in this study, 137 and 54 died in the hospital. So higher the D-dimer greater than 1 microgram per milliliter. So it affects both large and small vessels, and it can cause deep vein thrombosis, blocked renal circuits, line-related thrombosis, arterial thrombosis, CVA, myocardial infarction, peripheral arterial disease, and chill veins of the fingers and toes, and microvascular thrombosis. In the subsequent, I will show few patients how we are facing these patients, because as a vascular surgeon, ultimately the patients are coming to vascular surgeon and how we are managing. And all the patients are not so lucky to save the limbs or life, and few of them were able to save. So this is a lady where you can see that this is the post-COVID ward where the patient developed slowly the gangrene of the left upper limb and referred from another hospital, and where it is showing that that is thrombosis of the renal, the thrombosis of the left upper limb from the subclavian artery, axillary artery. You can see here. And here we try to do thrombolysis and thromboembolectomy, but still we could not save the limb. So the patient needed amputation distal to the elbow joint. So the incidence of thrombosis in COVID. So occurrence of venous thromboembolism is approximately in 20% of patients, and with cumulative incidence up to 49% during hospitalization. So this is a nice meta-analysis published in the journal where the Department of Surgery, it has been published, where the thromboembolism risk of COVID-19 is high and associated with a higher risk of mortality, and a systemic review and meta-analysis. Here, the 425 studies identified 42 studies enrolling 8,271 patients were included in the meta-analysis, where the venous thromboembolism was 21% and in the ICU was 31%, and overall pulmonary embolism rate was 13%, in ICU was 19%. So overall arterial thromboembolism rate was 2%. So pooled mortality rate was high, and this is one patient where the superficial vein thrombosis post-COVID, where we had to put a small nick and took out all the clots and put along with anticoagulation, applied the compression bandage. So this is various low molecular heparin trials, Mednox trial, Prevent trial. So where enoxaparin, dalteparin or fondaparinux we can give. And similarly, in the acute medical illness also different trials are there where the enoxaparin is a good help we can in comparison to unfractionated heparin. This is the published in different part of the world where the blood clotting, the report of high patients with different blood clottings, thrombosis is high. And these are the different guidelines. Journal of American College of Cardiology, World Health Organization, and Chest, American College of Chest Physician, and Ministry of our Government of India Health and Family Welfare Department. So different protocols they have gave. So here you can see patients with mild to moderate, the thrombosis is gradually increasing. And so potential for increased risk of venous thromboembolism and adverse outcomes happens particularly in age, bedridden stasis, inflammatory response, endothelial injury, hemostatic abnormalities, and DIC. So here in this study, you can see here in the Journal of American College of Cardiology, their guideline, you can see here the for venous thromboembolism, anticoagulation therapy in the high-risk patient, and as well as consider systemic fibrinolysis and catheter-directed surgical therapies in case not suitable for systemic fibrinolysis. So consider need and safety of hemodynamic support is and monitoring. So you can see here patients hospitalized COVID-19. So apart from the pharmacological venous thromboembolism prophylaxis, where we have to give the long-term prophylaxis, there the case selection is very important. But in moderate to high risk, we have to give long duration of thromboprophylaxis, minimum 6 weeks of thromboprophylaxis, and it can increase to 3 months depending on the patient scenario. And if the patient has already developed DVT and P, we have to give even if longer duration of anticoagulation. This is the protocol given by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, where moderate to severe patients we need to give anticoagulation along with anti-inflammatory and steroids. So this is one patient, as I told, is a young patient, 41-year-old IT engineer. So recently 4 years history of diabetes. Patient came to our OPD that I am having the hand pain and I am having this after COVID, 1 week old. So I told, how you are roaming around? No, sir, I went to a hospital where, because they told it is mild disease, they discharged me and sent back home. And because I am having this hand swelling, they told you go to a vascular surgeon. So as sir was, Bhatia sir was saying that universal precaution is very important. So how we are saving ourselves even if in OPD, that wearing proper double mask and distance maintaining, and we are having a barrier also. So then when we examined this patient, right upper limb distal pulses were absent, and the angiogram was showing that the right axillary artery distally the flow is not there. So we did, because the history was only 1 to 24 hours of history, so we gave catheter directed thrombolysis. And after giving overnight thrombolysis, next day we checked angio. We did a check angio where the flow was, both the hands were very good. Here you can see there was zero detection of in the pulse oximeter, and it came back to 34 to 35 after say 17 to 18 hours of thrombolysis. But thing is, then we thought, because there was residual thrombosis still there, we continued for another 6 hours and we stopped. And we kept the patient because COVID positive in the COVID was positive emergency ward, and we are monitoring. And the patient told in the early morning next day that I'm having some pain in the hand. Then sister checked, the saturation was good, and she gave some tramadol injection, and patient slept. And after 2 hours, when sister went again to check, patient was having cardiac silent MI, and we lost the patient. So the patient who are having extensive peripheral arterial thrombosis, the life risk is very high because of AMI. So patient with having acute kidney disease because of the COVID-19, for there how we have to give the anticoagulation, the dose we need to adjust as per the creatinine clearance. So standard prophylaxis is 40 mg, subsequently subcutaneously once daily. So we can reduce to 20 milligrams subcutaneously once daily in the kidney failure patients. So this is a ACCP guideline and expert panel report. So how anticoagulation prophylaxis with low molecular heparin or unfractionated heparin and no antiplatelets. So standard dose anticoagulation prophylaxis, and do not use systemic thrombolysis unless otherwise it is needed. So systemic thrombolysis only if hypotension and no increased risk of bleeding and patients with acute PE with cardiopulmonary deterioration after initiation of anticoagulation therapy. So to conclude, the hypercoagulability triggered by viral infection or inflammation is a prominent feature of COVID-19 infection, especially in severely affected cases. Externally, high incidence of thrombosis of both small and large vessels, many published guidelines with limited evidence based till now. So COVID-19 disease is commonly complicated by thrombosis, and all hospitalized patients should receive thromboprophylaxis and extended thromboprophylaxis depending on the severity of the patient. And as Bhatia sir told, the preoperative screening is very important. So preoperative screening validity revised to 5 days. So incubation period 5 to 14 days. So based on population and based risk assessment with ongoing community transmission. So if a patient tests COVID positive, surgical procedure should be deferred unless emergency for a specified period of time before surgery can be done. If emergency, then surgery or procedure can be done in COVID zone with appropriate precautions. So the patient can be separated to non-COVID zone on day 18 from the date of swabbing. So to summarize, the second wave with circulating strains of variants and mutants, increased transmission, spread, and chances of reinfections are more. So compliance to infection prevention and control precautions to be strictly followed to avoid exposure. So precautions like droplet and contact precautions, in addition to standard precautions and revised PPE, medical masks for non-COVID and in the non-emergency area where there is no COVID. So there's a regular medical mask, as I told, double mask, but N95 mask for COVID areas and face shield and surgical gown and gloves. But yesterday I was speaking to my brother-in-law, Professor Devaprasad Mahanti, who is anesthesia HOD at SCB present. So where we are discussing that which type of patients we are doing. So though in Apollo we have started all the regular surgeries, but I was saying that like late 90s, the universal precaution for HIV patients. So similarly, we are doing universal precaution. So we are thinking all the patients are positive. So by that way, how to prevent cross-contamination with the other patients and also our staff. So our staff also, but the precaution. So I was saying him that even if in our OT changing room where the surgeons used to sit there, so Apollo used to supply some tea there. So now after this corona phase came, the tea supply, it has stopped. So there is one particular area where tea vending machine is there. There only few person can go there, finish, and then the next team will come. Because in between surgery, when we need for some coffee or tea or something, we can take. So similarly, with our other staff also, the strict instruction is whenever you are feeling anything, please inform our ID team and don't come to the hospital immediately. Straight you go to the ID team, take the clearance, then you come to the hospital. So by that, we could do nice work in the second wave also, with less of our staff could got positive. Whoever got positive, not from the hospital, from the outside, from their home or through from their drivers or the helping hand in that home, and the hospital transmission was very less. So thank you. And when I was sharing this photo during 1993, when I was House Surgeon President, here our batchmates are there, and Honorable then Chief Minister Mr. Biju Patnaik here, he was signing our certificates, and Professor K.K. Misra, Kiran Kumar Misra, who was DMET that time, and Mr. Mustafiz, who was the health minister then, and here the Professor Sarda Patnaik sir, our cardiothoracic surgeon and principal that time was not visible. He was sitting opposite to Honorable Chief Minister, and I am very much thankful. And when I was giving this my visiting card, so that time I was thinking about our Vano Misra sir, who I think one of the person who cleared the DNB exam in the general surgery in the first attempt. So that time is a big thing in the 80s to clear DNB exam in the first attempt. So at present, I am giving the DNB vascular surgery super specialty training. One seat is with me, and with the our Dr. V.S. Bedi sir in Gangaram. He visited our center and approved one seat, and last 5 years, every year in the NEET exam, each one student is coming for 3 years. So those surgery PG who are here in this meeting, so I request them, they can note down my mobile number. Any queries on vascular surgery, I can tell them, because nowadays there's this super specialty NEET exam. It is once for one exam for all the papers. So if anybody is having good rank and they are interested for vascular surgery, I can guide them how they can go ahead and to take this subject. So thank you, and thank you, Vana sir. And any question, I'll be happy.
Thank you, Nihar, for a very practical talk. I now invite questions from all the faculties present. Any questions anybody else can ask?
Please unmute and ask.
Sir,
Dr. Nihar, you can unshare your.
Yes, sir.
to Dr. Bhatia.
Yes, sir.
Sir, am I audible?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, we have started to operate on semi-emergency cases now. We know that RT-PCR test is 30% authentic. But RT-PCR negative is 30% erroneous. And in our operation theater, we don't have HEPA filters. And with that, we don't have smoke evacuators. And with that, our healthcare workers working in the operation theater are not tested for COVID for months together. So how to deal with these cases, semi-emergency cases, that we have started to take up in our hospital nowadays, sir.
No, you have answered your question also, that yes, we should have preparedness, we should have all the facilities, and definitely the aerosol transmission has to be avoided in any case. As Dr. Nihar was also telling, that we follow the same policy, that even if one OT technician or OT nurse or anyone of our doctors has fever, we do not allow them to come to the theater. And we always make sure, even if they are going out to their own hometowns, once they come back, they have to have the RT-PCR test done. And if it is negative, then only we allow them to join our theater. One. Second thing is, if you do not have, as I mentioned, that if you do not have the smoke evacuating machine, then it is a good idea when you are, for example, doing laparoscopic surgery, you put the filter as well as the tubing, and that tubing is having the outlet into this hypochlorite solution. And that way, aerosol transmission has to be avoided. It is our practice that whenever our patients are inside the theater, not much crowding is there, one, and all the technicians, all the nurses are wearing the gloves throughout. They are wearing double mask throughout. They are having the PP also donned on them. So that is a very, very important. According to us, we strongly believe that any one single person can be a super spreader, and that can lead to a cascade of events. And you never know whose immunity is good, whose immunity is bad, who is vaccinated, who is not vaccinated, then the chances of complications are very high. So any and every small step, little things matter much. So everything matters. So we have to be very cautious about it.
I think Dr. Bhatia has given a good clue for all surgeons, whether it's a general surgeon,
Sir.
neurologist, or gynecologist practicing laparoscopic surgery, because we are afraid of the gas as a contaminant containing the virus. It will be a good practice to connect it to a bottle with hypochlorite solution, which is, I think, probably the cheapest. One very important point noted here, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sir, as per my knowledge goes, in a case of Australia antigen positive or a hepatitis B positive case, or a case of HIV, so there is contamination when used whether monopolar, bipolar, or harmonic. So what is your take on COVID positive cases? COVID especially when you are using this monopolar, bipolar, or harmonic?
No, we are using harmonic, but
Sir.
definitely if the COVID positive patient is there, we should definitely have the OT or theater which is dedicated only to COVID patients. It should not be mixed and match. That, for example, if we do one COVID patient plus and then next patient you are taking who is RT-PCR negative. No, it should never be. So our thinking is that we should have and I would request our principal and dean to have the right from beginning preparedness that these are the demarcated OTs in which whether it is gynecological emergency or gynecological surgery or urology or anything, but patient is positive, they should be taken in separate OTs, but non-COVID OTs should be absolutely separate.
Thank you, sir. In fact, since my name is Doctor, let me have a few of my submission.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm a urologist, I think, and we do a lot of transplant here also. In fact, Corona never deterred us to continue our transplant program. How we have been able to manage, I'll give our experience. I'll give an example. We did our cadaveric transplant right in the thick of Corona. In fact, our cadaveric transplant program kicked up at the beginning of Corona. If you all remember, on 30th January, the first case, 30th January 2020, the first case was detected from Kochi. And incidentally, our UCCON was going on. We completed our UCCON on 30th. So when we returned, we heard that the first case was detected there. Now, we joined here, and on March 4th, that is the most, at that time, the incidents were going up. And we got the first opportunity to do our cadaveric transplant. We spent sleepless night and we could conduct. Then next month, April 5th, we had 2 more cadaveric transplant. After that, we have stopped it. But that was a very big beginning of our cadaveric transplant program, and we became the 15th state in the country to have started this program. Now, that never deterred our transplant program because we have good number of transplant load also. What we did, in fact, what you have rightly pointed out, sir, that the best way to prevent a corona spread is by preventing, you're taking precautionary measures. That part is there. That is a gospel as regard corona is concerned. But the corona is a very treacherous organism, very treacherous. It can betray you anytime. Despite all the precautions that we take, it can sneak in by what means we can never know. We can never know. We only speculate. We feel that this is the way of transmission. And for that matter, possibly it will take another couple of years to know the transmission and pathogenesis. What we know is the initial part of the information. So we don't know the pathology as yet. We have known some, we have known, you can say 10% of the pathogenesis you have known. Even the treatment modality is also not very definitive. So what we did in our practice, we never stopped our transplant program during the corona pandemic. We have a very, very watertight area. You can say the transplant area, the kidney transplant unit is very watertight. We do not allow anybody to enter there. Those people who are functionary in the transplant unit, the patient, the attendants, the staff, nursing staff, the duty staff, and the doctors. We restricted their entry also. We only allowed very specific people to enter there. And when we contemplate a transplant, we do a COVID testing. The patient admitted for the program, we do a RT-PCR test during his test 3 times before we take for the surgery. 3 times. No, when he gets admitted, prior to that, we do a test. During his stay, we do one more because the waiting period is around 3 weeks when we admit them. Then we do a second one, both patient and whoever attendant is attending him or her. Then just 3 days prior to the proposed day of surgery. And what we do the OT staff, that is about the kidney transplant unit. What we do the OT staff, practically we are screening them almost every month. Almost every month we are screening them. So we have done not only transplant surgery, we have been doing regular surgery throughout the corona pandemic. Only for 3 months we had stopped because patients were not coming at that time. In the first phase, for 3 months we did not have patient, we stopped it. From May up to say September, May, June, July, August, September, around 4 to 4.5 months we stopped it. Again in September we resumed our activity. Even now, my anesthetist colleagues are a little bit unhappy towards me because we put good number of cases in the OT. And by God's grace, and because of this precautionary measure that we took, our resident also became positive. Once a resident become positive, yes, during the training period, some residents, because they're exposed in the OPD, they're going to referral to different wards. So any symptoms, slightest of symptom, we ask him to stay back, do a COVID testing, and we do screening of the rest of the residents. So it has to be very thoroughly, one has to see, to not to transmit a COVID-19. Rightly said, sir, you have rightly said, we are a bit extra cautious, even though recommendation is not there, we are a bit extra cautious. In last month, we have already done 3 transplants. So my anesthetist colleagues, they cooperate with us like anything. And I think our Professor Nivedita Pani is there. She is on the move always whenever we are in the conference. She can tell something more. Professor Pani.
Thank you, sir. Respected Dean and all the dignitaries on the web platform. Sir, we are getting lot of help from the authorities also. Regularly, the tests are being done. And with this test, we always come forward and we do the and give the anesthesia to the patient. And routine tests regularly, the RT-PCR test is done, then it is being taken. But about the emergency cases, we have to do the rapid antigen. After the rapid antigen, we take the case. And we are having also a 30-bedded central ICU. In that also, we have managed, like we have a rapid antigen test, immediately we keep 8 beds, and after the RT-PCR negative only we take to the rest 22 beds. So we are maintaining, sir, still then COVID is COVID. So anytime, anything we can be infected also. But we are trying our level best. We tell our students to be always with the mask, which is the most important. We regularly, our student anesthesiologists, I do not know about the others, they are always with either 2 masks or 3 masks. Even some students, they wear 3, and we generally, all of us, we generally wear 2 masks. Sir, we are managing.
I will add 2 more things for information of everyone. Sir, the 2 aspects. Our COVID hospital is 600-bedded COVID hospital, one of the state of the art, and it right inside the premises, inside the premise. Now this, we have got 4 units of COVID. There are 2 things I'll tell. Professor Misra, because of his endeavor, we have a dedicated COVID positive operation theater in one of the facility, dedicated what you are pointing out. And we have done good number of cases in the COVID positive OT also. And third thing, what really we feel very heartened is that we have every month 120 doctors doing duty in the COVID facility. And we have a strength of all type of category of paramedicals. If you take, it is about 700 staffs in the 600 bedded COVID hospital. If you look to every aspect of it, including security, the sanitary worker, the group D, the pharmacist, the nurses, the lab technician, the radiographer, if you take everybody, we have about 700 staff working in the COVID, and our positivity rate is negligible, very negligible. So in the first wave, there were good number of patients who became doctors who became positive. Fortunately, in the second wave, the positivity is very low and complications are hardly any those patients who have become positive. And in our setup, we do review every day, twice in a day, about the COVID facility, every day from 11:30 to 12:30, from 5:30 to 6. We monitor everything as regard the COVID management is concerned. We have a brilliant team with us. We have a very brilliant team, and they're all cooperating at every step of the management of the hospital. But sir, I will appreciate the way you have presented, sir. I must appreciate that you have given every bit about how to take precaution. What I added, what we do, sir. But definitely your input is going to help us further strengthen as regard the precautions are concerned. As regard Dr. Nihar is concerned, he is from this institution. He is a vascular surgeon, an eminent vascular surgeon, no doubt about it. But what is my proposition is that, you can add further, the surgery department is always vibrant under the leadership of Professor Banbihari Misra. Now, what you can always give further inputs as regard the COVID-19 is concerned. Well, you see, we have known some mechanism, some pathogenesis, yet to know many more things that we need to know. Many more things. We have lost few of our doctor friends also. Huge number of doctors, they have lost their life because of COVID pandemic. As per the IMS statistics, in the second wave, more than 700. So this is a big magnitude. We do not know how to prevent it. We do not know if we get contracted with the COVID-19, how to take care. And we do not have any way to know which are the cases will progress to fatality. We do not know. We lost Dr. KK Agarwal from Delhi, if you remember, sir.
Very close.
If you look to that, he was with a nasal prong oxygen. He was trying to give advices and services to doctors. He never realized that possibly I will develop that. Nobody can predict what is going to happen. So at the end of it, I will say that yes, we have to take precaution. We have to take extra care. We have to take extra care because we may be a part of the super spreading. That's the reason we have to be extra careful. And beyond that, the best part that we have encountered till now, doctors to patient transmission in our institution is 0. So we are not guilty that we have become part of the spread to the patient, and particularly surgical patient. The other way things has happened, but doctor has hardly transmitted to a patient. Thank for the patient hearing. It was a wonderful time.
Actually,
Dr. Bhatia,
sir, thanks, sir. Actually, as you told, the transplant, this COVID time in Apollo also, Dr. Subramaniam sir was there in urology. He has done a lot of transplant in that time, and one cardiac transplant they did, Professor Dr. Gokhale, A.G.K. Gokhale, where from the sample, this means cardiac, it has to supposed to come the heart from LV Nagar, that is almost 18 kilometers away from Jubilee Hills. So the administration gave the train this our metro rail. So through Metro Rail, because the partial lockdown where Metro Rail was not working, so heart was transported through Metro Rail to the Jubilee Hills and to save time. And that was one record that and the patient survived, and all our transplant almost nearly 100% result during this COVID time. So as sir told that we have to be cautious for all our patients, their relatives, like they have stopped only one attender. Yes, a few relatives, they will tell, I am also patient. And again, you will see the 3-4 attenders in your OPD. But what I saw, our hospital is central AC, in spite of that, how we are escaping with a proper mask and distance maintaining, and as Dr. Bhatia told that SMS to clean, keep, and even if we are not taking tea or coffee in the closed area. So that is prevention is much very important. And I am seeing regularly Professor Jayant Panda's his presentation and different training in from the Odisha. It is regularly it is happening. It is very good training to all the
To
hospital.
add to it, to add to it, one thing I'll just add. In fact, the program that has got the real setback is the cadaveric transplant program.
Yes.
Because, with Corona, the accident rate also went down drastically because of the lockdown and shutdown. So there is a setback to the cadaveric transplant. Very few centers are doing cadaveric now because the availability of organs has gone down. That is the only reason. But anyway, Professor Panda, if he wants to say something, because you are appreciated already.
Thank you, sir. Nice discussion. We are enjoying Dr. Bhatia and Dr. Nihar's presentation, and the cases and the pictures, horrible pictures of thromboembolic complications that Dr. Nihar has shown. Actually, we have seen few cases, but such a series of patients are really threatening, and they have done very good work during this time. Just one thing I'll add, like our Dean sir has already told, it's a very unpredictable virus. During the first wave, if you remember, many of my friends asked that should we go for COVID assessment of every patient that we are transferring to OT. In the month of March, April, May, it was not recommended. It was not in the guideline. Like we were admitting patients in the indoor without testing or screening for COVID. People were being operated without screening or testing for COVID. But a time came when not only the patient, the attendants were screened, and all non-emergency patients were asked not to be operated during the period. And the second wave, things went so horrible, and then many unpredictable deaths and unpredictable infections. And the first spread of the disease has affected many non-COVID surgeries, non-COVID medicine patients, and then things are still not comfortable. Still, we are not out of the second wave, though third wave is a speculation. So here, just to aid Dr. Bhatia, to aid Dr. Nihar, to aid our Dean sir and all Dr. Debo, everyone, I'll just tell that till we are not out of pandemic, let us follow universal precaution. Like in a HIV patient, we take precaution. Like in a COVID patient, we take precaution. Let us follow same with every patient, because you don't know, there is a false negative report. There is somebody who is exposed and in the incubation period. So every surgery or every patient that we encounter in the clinic or in the OPD or as an indoor patient, let us put in your mind this patient may be positive or may come positive, and we may know later, and he can be a potential spreader and a super spreader. With that, following universal precaution can make us safe, make people safe till we are not out of the pandemic.
Thank you, Professor Panda. Thank you, Professor Panda. I think Dr. Nihar wants to say something.
Actually, one thing to tell all the ICU patients, those our doctors and staff taking care of ICU, that many patients, because they are intubated or because of that they are in ICU, so we have to check all the extremities like upper limb and lower limb, because by the time we know that there is some gangrene happened, it is too late. So we have to check regularly every day, at least once, all the extremities and distal pulses are palpable or not. So if we can detect in the early stage, then some intervention can help to salvage those limbs. And it is very difficult to handle the relatives that one of patient here from Old City, the son asked, sir, my mother came out from the COVID, but you are saying that she is going to lose the limb because the limb was thrombosed, the arteries were thrombosed. So luckily we could save the limb by doing thrombolysis, and our patient was able to walk also, but the saturation never came above 88 with oxygen support. So finally we lost the patient because of lungs problem. So that time so we have to inform the patient that whether there is any extremities or peripheral arterial disease problem is there or not, or any thrombosis. So in all our ICU patients and also in the COVID ward, please speak to the patients. Are you having any problem? Because during this COVID time, my one of my relative who was admitted in one hospital, reputed hospital in Cuttack. So he was complaining that when doctor is coming, I am unable to know. He was SP of Keonjhar, now he has come to Cuttack. So then I told, no, in the PPE kit, you are unable to recognize them. So with the help of Debobhai, we could able to speak to the doctor. And I told him, please, you introduce yourself in the PPE kit. I am the doctor, I am doing the round. Any problem, please speak to us. So for that, in the COVID ward with PPE kit, please introduce yourself so that any complaint they will tell.
Thank you.
There is a food for thought. There is a food for thought,
Sir.
mainly for Dr. Bhatia and for Dr. Nihar. I think this we can deliberate time and again. This is from our own experience.
Sir, just
What
one
was
question to
process-
Dr. Nihar, sir.
Yeah.
We have also come across a lot of thromboembolic gangrene and complication, but have you come across any patient after vaccination, post-vaccination infarction or the gangrene?
Yes, actually, if you'll say the vaccination for the public, it started in the month of March. So initially it was for the frontline workers. So those they are having, but what I have found, where we have lost the limb or lost the patient, the vaccine, they have taken only one dose. The second dose they have not taken.
No, not that. Post-vaccination. Actually,
That I'm saying. Both.
we have reported cases of Covishield,
Yes.
which is a thrombogenic vaccine.
No, not a single patient post Covishield vaccine we could see any thrombosis.
Okay. Fine.
I have just a small question to both our speakers and the galaxy of faculties.
Sir.
That in spite of the RT-PCR remaining negative, to which category of patient you are asking for a HRCT?
No, I was about to talk about it for the food for thought to Dr. Bhatia, what you have mentioned, Professor Misra, food for thought. Today I was having a review of the COVID facility. We are initially not very keen to know the vaccination status because by that time vaccination was not much. But for last 2 weeks, we have taken the drive to know the vaccination status and the infections, reinfection, or you can say breakthrough infection. Now today out in the OPD, we had 155 patients, 155 patients in the fever clinic, out of which we have 46 patients who had got vaccinated. There is 39 patients first dose, 17 patients second dose in the OPD. Whereas among the admitted 53 patients that we admitted in last 24 hours, there were 14 in the first dose, 3 with the second dose. So this is again a food for thought for all of you to have a reconciliation how we have to go ahead. That is one. I'm giving a figure of 1 day only. Now the second thing I would like to say what Professor Misra has already mentioned. Well, you see, RT-PCR, is it really truly reliable? This is a food for thought. I think one has to look into. And secondly, why we say so, whether it is truly reliable or not. We have lockdown and shutdown. You have seen the crowd and you have seen how the COVID norm is, relegated to the background. Who bothers about COVID now? So these two things has to be kept borne in mind, and this is the food for thought. If no other question is there, if any other questions, please quickly make it. It is 5:15 already crossed.
I would put it.
Today's
Yes, sir, just to answer Professor Mishra's question,
Yeah.
whether to go for CT scan or not in a patient who is negative for the RT-PCR, in the guideline, we take RT-PCR as the gold standard, but all of us know there are false negative reports. It's sensitive up to 70% cases. So suppose,
Provided there is a rider,
sir, there is a rider.
provided there is no collection error.
Sir, provided there is no collection error, sir.
Yeah, that part you have to keep in mind.
Sir, so we are seeing a good number of patients who are clinically COVID, who have symptoms, who have a very valid track record or contact, and they have all features of SARI and ELI, and unfortunately, we don't get a positive report by antigen or say RT-PCR. In that case, suppose we have some corroborative findings of high ESR, high D-dimer, and in the a CT scan, if the patient is having a CORAD 5 or CORAD 4, a suggestive score, that's taken as a probable COVID. And in the interest of pandemic, it has been recommended that anybody who is highly suspicious to be admitted, to be treated as a patient of COVID to save life. That has come.
Can we, there where the question comes. In suspicion, the so-called antiviral remdesivir, can it be started?
With the consent of the patient, sir.
No, not that way. How far we are logical, how far we are ethical. One. And secondly, all SARI CT scan is mandatory. What Dr. Mishra is asking is a different question. So all SARI need to undergo a CT scanning or HRCT, whatever you say. But that is a different ball game altogether. We are talking from the surgeon's perspective. Is there any indication of a CT scan without symptom when we are thinking of an operation? The answer is no.
Sir, I was asking actually in a different
go for
way.
a chest X-ray.
Sir, I was
Sir.
putting this question in a different
Yeah, Dr.
way.
Bhatia is telling.
In
Dr.
a patient.
Bana, wait. Dr. Bhatia is telling something.
Yeah.
I just want to re-emphasize that as you mentioned, the technique has to be perfect, but more important than technique is timeline. When did the symptoms start? When did the RT-PCR became negative? When is the patient having any respiratory symptoms or not? At that time, if for example, even if RT-PCR was negative, if the patient is developing the symptoms and he's having fever, he's having chest symptoms, definitely there is an indication of HRCT. And if the HRCT, the score, as we mentioned, it is 8, more than 8, if it is there, mild, moderate, severe disease is there, then these require treatment. And regarding the remdesivir, all of us know, in US, they are not at all giving remdesivir. They have never given the remdesivir and still the patients have come out. So as you mentioned very nicely, that it was a virus, which is a smart virus. It is a virus which is having the uncertainty attached to it. So much of uncertainty, so much of mutation. We should carry on learning from it, but there is a safety in more safety. The split second becomes eternal. A split second becomes eternal. So we should not, or even a slightest doubt is there, go ahead, attack it fully so that all of us are winners at the end.
Yeah, Professor Mishra, you were telling something. I'm sorry.
Sir, actually, my question was different. That in a post-COVID patient, when we are planning for a major surgery, whether we should go to assess the pulmonary status in terms of a HRCT, or some people, what I have heard, they have recommended a PFT. What should be our choice? Because we are planning for a major surgery, maybe for 3 to 4 hours under general anesthesia. What should be the guideline in this patient?
If it is a moderate or severe COVID in the history, definitely we are going in for elective surgery, maybe 2 months, 3 months after. And if the patient was ventilated, it is an indication of going in for CT scan also.
Should we go for a CT scan for a local anesthesia case? For a case under local anesthesia? We don't need to go for a HRCT. Okay.
No.
No. First of all, I think that the question has different implication. When you mention Professor Mahanti local, it may be regional also. So both,
Yes.
not only local, regional as well.
Yeah.
Now, what is more important, the protocol Government of India guidelines, ICMR guidelines are very clear cut. It is sacrosanct for us to follow. Whatever modification we do, not as per guidelines. We do it for the convenience, for the patient and for the surgeon, for mutual, precautions. That is the reason we do. Now, what Professor Misra has asked very clearly. Now, whenever you are contemplating a major surgery post-COVID patient, definitely a post-COVID patient after the permitted time, if you are taking up, if he has any pulmonary symptom, he needs to be assessed. The post-COVID is not the criteria. The criteria is any pulmonary symptom.
Sir, post-COVID, should you go for HRCT or simply
No.
pulmonary function test will be sufficient?
If a person is having post-COVID pulmonary symptoms,
Yeah.
we cannot think of having a surgery. So
Right.
that becomes a domain of the pulmonary medicine or the physician. So there is no guideline as regards surgery. There are precautions as regards surgery is concerned. If you contemplate to do a surgery, the patient has to be totally symptom-free. There should be no symptom, respiratory symptom, per se, nothing. Otherwise, you cannot think of surgery.
Exactly, sir.
Any
Can you
other
go for
questions?
sir? Can you go for a chest X-ray? Simple chest.
That is enough. And Professor Mahanti, it was not expected of you. Any patient undergoing a surgery, as a routine, practice, you have to make an assessment. Pre-operative assessment and chest X-ray is mandatory.
Is a must.
Sir, I think the discussion will continue even late night. Sir, with your permission, if you allow.
Sir,
I will just put forth one more thing.
sir.
Sorry, there was a little inconvenience. There was a little technical glitch. That's the reason a lot of our participants couldn't join. It was because of my fault, or you can say fault of our telemedicine service. So we are thinking that the capacity is 500. Suddenly we find the capacity has gone down to 100 today itself. Even in the morning when I was conducting a Zoom meeting, it was 500. So I feel extremely sorry. Apology for all the colleagues, they could not participate in such an interesting discussion in a scenario of COVID where we are planning for a surgery. Lot of faculty have been deprived. I take the personal blame. Thank you all.
Now you can always send them the recording of this.
Yeah, that we have done, sir. Thank you so much.
Sir, to the last, I request Dr. Sivabrata Kar, the resource person of our department, to offer a vote of thanks.
Respected Dean Principal Sir, I on behalf of Department.
Just a minute. As a genuine customary, I really appreciate both Dr. Praveen Bhatia and Dr. Nihar, both of them having joined us in our real auspicious program that we are going to have, Platinum Jubilee celebration. On behalf of the institution, we'll definitely send you invitation to attend. Whoever speakers are coming and participating in our Platinum Jubilee, pre-Platinum Jubilee CME, we'll be extending invitation. And possibly, as you said, the smart corona may steal away the soul. So we are prepared for both physical as well as a hybrid. If it is physical, please join us physically. If it is hybrid, we will definitely send you the Zoom link. Kindly join us. And thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, respected Dean and Principal Sir, for chairing the session and giving your valuable comments and valuable thoughts, which will be definitely beneficial for all of us. I must thank Dr. Praveen Bhatia Sir, who has joined the chief speaker on this occasion from New Delhi, who is the chief consultant of bariatric surgery and laparoscopic surgery at a global hospital. And from his inside busy schedule, he committed to join us. We are extremely thankful to you, sir, and we hope we will get you frequently in our departmental seminar also as usual. I thank Dr. Nihar Ranjan Pradhan, who is our elder brother, for joining this webinar as a guest speaker also from Hyderabad. And we are also benefited by knowing something from this COVID complications of thrombotic complications of post-COVID. And I must thank extremely from my core of heart to all the esteemed senior faculty members, all the faculty members of our this prestigious institute for attending in such a large number. And we hope these webinars or these physical seminars afterwards will continue in future also. Thank you all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
God bless.